I want to tell you something that I've never said out loud before. Not because I was afraid of sounding crazy. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. I'm telling you now because I quit 6 months ago. My NDA expired, and honestly, I don't think it matters anymore what anyone thinks of me. What matters is that you know this happened, that it's still happening, and that the people responsible for answering when you call for help, they know about it too. They just don't talk about it. What matters is that for 11 years, I worked as a 911 dispatcher in a mid-sized county in the Pacific Northwest. Not a big city, not a small town. The kind of place where you know roughly how many calls you're going to get on a Friday night, and you're almost always right. The kind of place where nothing is supposed to surprise you after the first 2 years. I was good at my job. I want you to understand that. I wasn't a rookie who spooked easily. I'd taken calls from people dying. I'd stayed on the line with a 7-year-old whose mother wasn't breathing. I'd talked a man down from a bridge overpass on a Tuesday morning in February while eating a gas station sandwich with my other hand, because that's just what the shift was. You learn to separate. You learn to stay flat, stay functional, stay in the protocol. That's the job. So when I tell you that what started happening on the night of March 4th changed something in me permanently, I need you to know that it takes a lot to change someone like me. It was 2:47 in the morning. I remember the time because I just logged a domestic disturbance call and was watching the clock, the way you do in the dead stretch between 2 and 4 when time starts doing strange things. The board was quiet. My colleague Dana had stepped out to get coffee. It was just me, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the low static of the radio. Then a call came in, standard alert. I put on my headset, pulled up the intake screen, and said what I'd said 10,000 times before. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Not dead silence. There was something on the line, a kind of texture, like the sound a room makes when it's very large and very empty, like the air itself was the caller. I repeated the phrase. Protocol says 3 attempts before you flag it as a ghost call and move on. I made my second attempt, then my third, and then the line disconnected. I flagged it. Ghost call. Moved on. Except, and this is the part I didn't understand until much later, I looked at the number on my screen before I closed the intake log. The format was wrong. I don't mean it was an unknown number or a blocked number. We get those. There are codes for those, ways the system handles them, ways they display. This was different. The number had the right number of digits. It looked, at a glance, like a normal number, but the area code was 000, and the last 4 digits were identical. 4 of the same number repeated. I'd never seen that before. In 11 years, I had never seen that format come through our system. I typed a note into the log. Anomalous caller ID format, flagging for tech review. I hit submit. I moved on. I didn't think about it again until the next morning, when I saw the local news alert on my phone during my drive home. A man had been found dead in his car on Route 9 at approximately 3:15 in the morning. Single vehicle. No other cars involved. The car had simply drifted off the road and into a drainage ditch. No signs of a medical emergency. No alcohol in his system. No explanation. The time of death, according to the preliminary report, was estimated somewhere between 2:45 and 3 a.m. I pulled over. I sat in my car for a long time. Then I told myself what any rational person tells themselves. It was a coincidence. Ghost calls happen every shift. People die on roads every night. The overlap in timing meant nothing. I told myself that for exactly 9 days. And then, on the 9th day, it happened again. The second call came in on a Thursday, 3:12 a.m. I know the exact time because by then I had started writing things down, not in the official log, in a small black notebook I kept in the left pocket of my jacket. The kind of thing you buy at a drugstore for $2. I don't know exactly why I started doing it. Some part of me that I wasn't fully listening to yet had decided that certain things needed to exist somewhere outside the system. The call was identical in structure to the first one. Same alert tone, same silence on the line. That big, hollow, room-sized silence. Same anomalous number format when I pulled up the intake screen. Area code 000, last 4 digits repeated. This time it was 4s, 4 4s. I made my 3 attempts. The line disconnected. I wrote it down. Time, date, number format. I flagged it in the system for tech review, same as before. And then I sat very still for a moment, looking at the board, listening to the fluorescent lights. And I made myself a quiet promise that I was going to be rational about this. The rational thing was to wait and see. I didn't have to wait long. By the time I got home that morning, there was already a story developing on the local news site. A woman, 34 years old, had been found unresponsive in her apartment by a neighbor who noticed her door had been left open. Time of death was being estimated as late the previous night, somewhere in the window of midnight to 4 a.m. Cause unknown, pending autopsy. I sat at my kitchen table and I read that article 4 times. Then I opened my notebook and I wrote her description underneath the call log entry. I didn't know her name yet. I wrote, woman 34, apartment, cause unknown, found Thursday morning. And underneath that, I wrote 2 words that I immediately felt stupid for writing and then did not cross out. I wrote, it's connected. Now here's the thing about human psychology that I understood even then, even in the middle of it. We are pattern recognition machines. That's not a strength, it's a vulnerability. We find patterns in static. We find faces in wood grain. We find meaning in coincidence because our brains were built in an environment where missing a pattern could kill you, and seeing a false one usually couldn't. So I knew, I genuinely knew, that what I was doing could be exactly that. A brain doing what brains do, taking 2 data points and drawing a line between them that wasn't really there. So I decided I needed a 3rd data point, and I didn't have to manufacture one. It found me. 16 days after the second call, on a Sunday at 4:01 in the morning, the alert tone sounded again. Same silence, same hollow air. Area code 000, last 4 digits, 7s, 4 7s. I wrote it down before I even finished the 3rd verbal attempt. My hand was steady. That scared me more than anything else, how steady my hand was. Like some part of me had already accepted what this was and was just waiting for the rest of me to catch up. By Sunday afternoon, a retired school teacher who lived 20 minutes outside of town had been found by her daughter. She had died sometime overnight. She was 71, no known health conditions. Her daughter told the local paper she had seemed completely fine at dinner the night before. She had laughed at something on television. She had said goodnight. I closed my laptop and I sat in my darkened kitchen, and I understood that I had a problem. Not the kind of problem you take to your supervisor. Not the kind you file a report about. Because what was I going to say? that I had received 3 anomalous calls from a number format our system couldn't recognize, and that each time, someone in the county had died within hours. I could already hear how that sounded. I could already see the look on my supervisor's face, the careful, neutral look that people use when they're deciding whether to be concerned about you. So instead, I started doing research. I pulled every ghost call log I could access going back 18 months. I wasn't supposed to do that, not without a formal request. But I knew the system well enough to navigate it quietly. I was looking for the 00 area code. I was looking for the repeated final digits. I found 7 more. 7 calls spread across the previous year and a half that I had never personally taken. Different dispatchers, different shifts, all flagged as anomalous, all submitted for tech review, all, as far as the system was concerned, unresolved. Meaning IT had looked at them and had no explanation for the number format, and had simply closed the ticket with a note that said, "Origin unknown, possible system artifact." I cross-referenced the dates with the county death records, which are public, which anyone can access if they know where to look. 7 calls, 7 deaths, all within a 6-hour window of the call, all with no clear cause, or causes that were listed as pending, or causes that were quietly updated weeks later to things like cardiac event or undetermined natural causes. I sat with that for a long time. Then I did something that I think, in retrospect, was either very brave or very stupid. I went back to the system and I submitted a formal request to IT. Not about the number format this time, about something else. I asked them to show me the internal classification codes applied to those 7 calls. 3 days later, I got a response. It was a single line. It said, "Those records have been flagged under Protocol 7 null. Access restricted. Please direct further inquiries to your regional supervisor." I had worked in that building for 11 years. I had never heard of Protocol 7 null. I had never seen that designation on any document, any manual, any training material. I went to my regional supervisor the next morning. She looked at me for a long moment when I said the words. And I want to tell you about that look, because it's the thing that kept me up for weeks afterward. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't the blank face of someone hearing something unfamiliar. It was recognition. She knew exactly what I was talking about. And then she smiled, a small, careful, professional smile. And she said, "I'll have IT follow up with you directly." IT never followed up. And for a while, I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe the look on her face was just tiredness. Maybe Protocol 7 null was some legacy administrative tag that meant nothing. Maybe all of it. The calls, the deaths, the restricted records. Maybe it was all just the universe doing what the universe does, which is arrange things into shapes that look like meaning but aren't. I almost convinced myself. And then came the call that broke the pattern entirely. It was a Wednesday, 2:58 a.m. I heard the alert tone and I already knew. The way you know sometimes before you pick up the phone that the call is going to be bad. Except this time what I knew was different. I knew it was going to be one of those calls. The hollow silence, the impossible number, the entry in my black notebook. And I was right about all of it. Area code 000, last 4 digits, 2s, 4 2s. The silence on the line was the same as it had always been. That vast, pressurized quiet that felt less like an empty line and more like something listening. I made my 3 attempts. The line disconnected. I wrote it down. And then I waited. I want you to understand what that waiting was like. I drove home that morning, watching the road the way you watch something you're afraid of. I checked the local news site when I got in. I checked it again 2 hours later. I set a notification for the county's public incident reports. I sat in my kitchen with my notebook open and a cup of coffee that went cold. And I watched my phone. And I waited for the name of a person I had never met to appear on a screen and tell me they were gone. I waited all day. Nothing. By evening, I told myself it was too early. Sometimes the reports were delayed. Sometimes bodies weren't found immediately. I'd learned that the hard way over the previous months. Twice, I'd almost convinced myself the pattern had broken, only to find the death notice buried in a Thursday update or a weekend summary. So I waited through the night, and the next day, and the day after that. A week passed. Then 2. I checked every public record I could access. I cross-referenced, I searched. I read every incident report and obituary and local news brief that came out of that county in the following 3 weeks. Nobody died. Not in the window. Not in a way that fit. The pattern had broken, and I cannot fully explain to you what happened to me in the weeks that followed, because I'm not sure I fully understand it myself. But the closest I can come is this. When you have been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and someone suddenly takes it from you, even if you don't entirely trust that it's gone, your body responds before your mind does. My shoulders dropped. I started sleeping again. Real sleep. Not the thin, anxious half-sleep I'd been living on for months. I stopped opening the notebook. I left it in my jacket pocket, and then one day, I moved it to a drawer and didn't take it back out. I told my wife. Not everything. I didn't tell her about the restricted records or Protocol 7 null or the look on my supervisor's face. But I told her about the calls and the pattern I thought I'd seen, and how I'd been quietly terrified for months, and how now it seemed like maybe it had been nothing. Just coincidence stacked on coincidence. The way coincidences do when you're sleep-deprived and looking for something to explain a feeling you can't name. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then she was quiet for a moment. And then she said something that I've thought about many times since. She said, "You know what I think? I think you've been doing this job for too long. I think you spend so much time at the edge of other people's worst moments that your brain started manufacturing emergencies just to have something to do with all that vigilance." And I thought, yes, that's exactly it. That's the most reasonable explanation I've heard. I went back to work the next week, feeling for the first time in almost a year like myself, like the version of myself that existed before March 4th. I took my calls. I filed my logs. I ate my gas station sandwich at 3 a.m. and watched the clock and felt the ordinary tedium of the job settle back over me like something warm. I left the notebook in the drawer. I didn't think about 000 area codes or Protocol 7 null or the careful look on my supervisor's face. For 23 days, I was fine. And then, on the 24th day, I was driving home from a night shift on a Tuesday morning in early November, and my phone rang. I looked at the screen. The number was mine. My own cell phone number displayed on my own cell phone screen, calling me. I remember thinking very clearly and very calmly that this was a technical glitch. Phones do strange things. Spoofing happens. There are robocall operations that hijack local numbers. I knew this. I told myself this in the exact moment I was looking at the screen, and I believed it, and I answered the call. And I heard my own voice say, "911, what's your emergency?" Not a recording, not an echo. My voice, in real time, saying the words I had said 10,000 times. My cadence, my flat professional tone, the slight emphasis I always put on the word "your," a habit I'd developed years ago and never fully lost. The call disconnected, and the car behind me honked because I had, without realizing it, let my speed drop to almost nothing in the middle of the road. I pulled onto the shoulder. I sat there for a long time with the phone in my hand, and the engine running and the November light coming gray and flat through the windshield. And the thing I remember most is not fear. What I felt, sitting on that shoulder with my own number still glowing on the screen, was something much quieter than fear. It felt like recognition, like the pattern hadn't broken at all, like it had just been waiting for me to relax. I don't know how long I sat on that shoulder. Long enough for 3 trucks to pass me and make the car shake. Long enough for the gray light to shift slightly, the way it does in November when the clouds are moving fast and the sun is trying to decide whether it's worth the effort. I kept looking at the call log on my phone. My number, my name, because I'm in my own contacts, the way most people are, the way you add yourself by accident at some point and never delete it. My name on the screen with a call duration of 14 seconds. 14 seconds. I played it back in my head. My voice, my exact phrasing. The slight pause before emergency that I'd developed because early in my career, a trainer had told me that pause gives the caller half a second to breathe before they answer. And I'd never stopped doing it, even after I forgot where I learned it. That pause was there, in my voice, coming out of a call I did not make. I want to stop here for a second, because I know what some of you are thinking. Spoofing. It has to be spoofing. Someone cloned my number, ran it through a VoIP service, called me as a prank or a test or something I'm not understanding. I thought the same thing. I thought it so hard and so fast that it almost worked. Almost. Except for the pause. Nobody knew about the pause. It wasn't something I'd ever mentioned. It wasn't visible in any recording of my calls that I knew of. And believe me, in the weeks that followed, I went back and checked. It was just a thing I did, unconsciously, 11 years into a job. The kind of detail that lives in muscle memory and nowhere else. Whoever, whatever, was on that line knew it. I started driving again. I don't fully remember deciding to. I just became aware that I was moving, that my hands were on the wheel, that I was signaling to merge back onto the road. The automatic parts of me had decided we were going home, and the rest of me was just cargo. I called my wife. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what I would have said. I was about 7 minutes from home when I noticed the sound. It was coming from my phone, which was sitting face up in the cup holder. Not a ring. The phone wasn't ringing. More like a texture, a presence in the audio. The same quality I'd heard dozens of times through a dispatcher's headset in the dead hours of the morning. That vast, pressurized silence. I looked down at the screen. The call was still connected. 14 seconds, the log had said. But the call was still connected. The timer was running. I watched it tick from 9:42 to 9:43 to 9:44. And the sound coming through the speaker was that same hollow, room-sized quiet. And I understood in a way that bypassed language entirely that I needed to pull over. I signaled. I found a spot on the shoulder, gravel under the tires, the car rocking slightly as a semi passed. I picked up the phone. I said, "Hello?" The silence shifted. That's the only way I could describe it. Like something on the other end adjusted. Like it had been waiting for me to speak first. And then, very quietly, from what sounded like a very long distance away, I heard a sound that I have spent the last 6 months trying to find a rational explanation for and have not found one. It was the sound of a dispatch board. My dispatch board. The specific combination of alert tones and background radio static, and the particular acoustic signature of that room that I would recognize anywhere after 11 years inside it. And underneath it, barely audible, the sound of someone typing, working a shift, in the silence of a building where, at that hour, I was supposed to be the only one awake. I ended the call. I sat on that shoulder for a long time with my hands in my lap and the phone face down on the passenger seat and the engine running. And I watched the cars pass, and I breathed. And I tried to locate, somewhere inside myself, a version of this that made sense. I'm still looking. What I know is this: I did not drive home that morning. At some point, and I have no memory of this, which is the part that frightens me most when I think about it now. At some point, I stopped the car. The engine was off. The phone was still face down on the passenger seat. And I was still sitting there when the next part of the story began. Except, I'm not the one who can tell you that part, because I wasn't there for it. My name is Dana. I was his colleague. I worked the same shift, same county for 6 years. He trained me when I started. He was the one who taught me the pause before emergency. He said a trainer told him that once, and he never stopped doing it. I never stopped doing it either, after he showed me. I'm the one who found his phone. It was a Tuesday morning in November, just after 7. I was coming off my own shift, taking the long way to my car the way I sometimes do when the night has been bad and I need the cold air before I can face the drive home. The parking lot wraps around the side of the building, and there's a stretch of road visible from the far end of it, maybe 100 yards out. I saw his car before I registered what I was looking at. It was pulled over on the shoulder, engine off, hazards not on, just sitting there the way a car sits when the person inside has decided to stop and think for a minute. Except when I got closer, I could see the front seat was empty. I called his name. Nothing. I tried his cell. I could hear it ringing from inside the car, muffled through the glass, and I watched the screen light up on the passenger seat, face down, and ring out. I called dispatch. I called his wife. I stood on the shoulder in the November cold, and I looked up and down the road in both directions, and there was nothing. Just the flat gray morning and the sound of traffic and his car sitting there with the passenger door unlocked and his phone on the seat and his black notebook open on the dashboard. I looked at the notebook through the window for a long time before I opened the door. The last entry was from that morning. I recognized the format immediately. Date, time, number. I'd seen that format before. Flagged in the system, submitted to tech, quietly closed. Area code 000. Last 4 digits repeated. And underneath it, in his handwriting, one line that he must have written while sitting on that shoulder in the gray November light before whatever happened next. It was always going to be me. The police came, then more police. Then people I didn't recognize in cars with no markings, who spoke quietly to the officers and then spoke quietly to each other and did not speak to me at all. Someone took the notebook. Someone told me I could go home. I asked about Protocol 7 null. I don't know why I said it. I hadn't known that phrase until I read his logs later. The ones he'd left on a personal drive that his wife found and gave to me because she didn't know what else to do with them. The officer I asked, young guy, couldn't have been more than 26. He stopped writing in his notepad when I said it. He looked at me for a moment. Then he wrote something down, tore the page out, folded it, and put it in his pocket instead of his report. Then he said, "Ma'am, I'd recommend you go home and get some rest." He never came back to ask me anything. Nobody did. His car was towed by the end of the afternoon. His phone was taken as evidence and never returned to his wife. The black notebook was gone. And the calls, the 00 calls, the ones flagged under Protocol 7 null, I checked the system when I got back to work the following week. The records had been deleted. Not archived. Not restricted. Deleted. If you're listening to this and you work in emergency dispatch, anywhere, any county, any state, and you've seen a number come through with an area code that shouldn't exist, I need you to do something for me. Don't write it down. Don't ask about it. Don't look into it. Just flag it as a ghost call. Close the log and go get a coffee and come back and do your job and go home and hug whoever's waiting for you there. Because I've been thinking about something for 6 months now. Something I can't stop thinking about no matter how hard I try. The pause before emergency. Nobody knew about that pause. He told me himself. He'd never mentioned it to anyone. It wasn't in any recording. It lived only in him and in me. Because he showed me. And whatever called him that morning knew it. Which means whatever called him that morning knew him. Really knew him. And I don't know what that means. I've turned it over 600 times and I don't know what it means. But I sleep with the lights on now. And I never take the long way to my car anymore.